Hey guys, Matt here. Welcome to the next episode of my bossing series. So today we're actually going to be looking at the first encounter for the final invitation, which is going to be the Feared, and that is going to be Cortex. So in terms of how to acquire the map, it's basically the exact same as all of the other synthesized maps. You have a 0.5% chance per awakening level when you kill a T14 plus map boss to get one of these maps. Now, of course, this is shared with all the other maps, so in reality, it's pretty rare. The difference between Cortex is that it's T14 plus, while the other memory maps are actually T11 plus, right? But that's how you go about dropping these maps. It's also possible that Xana sells one to you, however, that's extremely rare. And it's also possible to just randomly drop one as a reward from a map boss skill. But overall, a very, very rare drop, which is why it's so pricey. Okay, now that we've talked about how to actually go about acquiring the map, let's talk real quick about the actual modifiers on the map, because this is very interesting. Essentially, Cortex will have between 3 and 5 random modifiers. So these could be any modifiers from things like for additional projectiles, resistances, map is inhabited by whatever, right? All of those, just random modifiers. And then 2 to 4 synthesis global modifiers. These synthesis global modifiers are the ones that are basically going to dictate what you are getting in terms of loot from the map itself, right? So it could be fragments, it could be maps, it could be influenced items, it could be just about anything in the game. But the thing is, you don't actually know until you open up the map, right? You don't know until you open up the map. One thing to note also is that Cortex is always monster level 83. So the actual map tier of the Cortex map itself does not matter at all either. So if there's ever a difference in price or anything like that for map tiers, there's no reason to go for a higher map tier. It's always monster level 83. And then the loot and the amount of stuff you're going to get is dictated by this line right here. This one doesn't really do so much. Okay, now let's have a look at the loot itself, because it is also different from the other memories, right? When it comes to Cortex, Cortex is actually really expensive for a very simple reason. Bottled Faith is where you that's where you acquire that from Cortex boss itself. And that is the only place in the entire game where you can get this outside of divination cards, I guess, right? So Bottled Faith, an extremely strong flask, gives you base crit damage up to 2%, which is insane, and then of course 10% more damage from the 10% here, and then consecrated ground as well. So there's a lot going on. This flask is pretty crazy, but it's also very pricey, which is why Cortex is so pricey itself. You cannot drop any of the circle rings. Those are not a part of the drop pool. You can drop the Garb of the Ephemeral. Now, this is a very good chess piece, typically used for anime guardians, for minion builds, right? That have an anime guardian, so that's where these are typically used. They're actually pretty expensive as well. Typically, if you drop one of those, they should just about cover the price of your Cortex map itself, so you shouldn't be losing money there. There's even some profit to be made sometimes in an early league scenario. Then you can also drop the Offering of the Serpent. This is like one of the worst case scenarios. If you drop these, you typically just instantly lost money, and I believe they're the most common drop of them all. I'm not 100% sure about that. And the final thing that you can drop is going to be Nebulous. Nebulous is interesting because in an early league scenario, right, when they don't really exist, they're actually very expensive, but they drop down in price extremely fast because they're also very common and not so much in demand. That being said, one thing to note about the Nebulous is that the rolls on it matter a lot, but not just the roll, the implicits also matter, right? Sure, the 15 to 20 and the 15 to 20 on the cast speed and the cold and lightning damage, those are very important. If you get like an 18 20 20, it's going to be worth a lot more than just a random set of rolls, but the implicits also matter a ton, right? So things like critical strike multiplier, things like even flat fire damage to spells, because that can enable your Cinder Swallow, things like, of course, explode, spell crits. There's a lot of modifiers as the implicits that actually matter a ton. On the Offering of the Serpents, it's kind of the same thing. There are some modifiers, but realistically most of them are not so great. Garb of the Ephemeral, pretty much anything you get in terms of implicit, it's still going to be very good. There are some that are worth a lot more. So for example, I think there's one that says something like Anime Guardian drops items on death. So that means that you basically, if your Anime Guardian dies, you basically don't lose anything, right? So that's huge, right? So you have to spend an extra, you know, 4 to 10x or whatever building your animate guardian every time. But of course, you're gonna have to pay for that because that implicit is going to be significantly more expensive. But yeah, otherwise, it's pretty much the only one that's of any real interest. Bottle Fate doesn't really have any implicit. So that's pretty much it for the loot. Now let's have a look at the fight. The fight is a 4-phase, or technically 5-phase fight. You're going to be fighting 4 different bosses and 1 ad phase. So there's a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. The first thing you're going to fight is the Fractal Gargantuan, which is a golem that is very similar to the first golem from the first memory boss. He does the exact same thing, right? He gets the whip, right? So he does the little whip thingy. He does the beam. He does the leap slam where he jumps on top of you. He does the V slam, so where he slams the ground and then he does like a V shape. These guys, right? And then they explode after a while. He does the projectile laser combos. So that's where he basically puts some projectiles and then he'll wipe them out and explode them at the same time. So this does AoE damage. He does the projectile spin combo, which is the exact same, but this time he's comboing the projectile and his spinning, right? So this is quite deadly as well. But overall, he's very squishy. You'll see that even on my 5-link build, I pretty much annihilate this guy. He's very, very squishy. So you probably won't be seeing most of these mechanics at all unless your build does very, very little damage. Okay, the next that we have is the Fractal Titan. So this is the second of the bosses, I believe. This one definitely a lot harder to deal with than the golem, but again, very squishy bosses, right? There's 4 bosses, so most of them are actually quite squishy, except for the last one, I believe, can be a little bit annoying. But one thing to note about these is that they're a bit of a DPS check because of the vortexes that they put on the ground. They reset after every phase, but the thing is, if you're not killing the boss fast enough within its phase, it can actually fill the entire arena with these vortexes to the point where you can't sit anywhere and be safe anywhere, and then you just brick your fight. So it's very important that if you are going to be doing a Cortex, make sure that you have sufficient damage so you're not going to be bricking your fight. Okay, so talking about the Fractal Titan. Fractal Titan does this explosion where he charges up. You can see him there, and then there's going to be lines that appear on the ground, and after a second they're going to blow up. Let's see if we can see it properly here. Yeah, there we go. We can see him, and then boom, 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 right? And then he also has the energy pylons. Otherwise, what he does is basically the exact same as the first guy, so there's not too much going on there. The Syntheth Masterpiece. So this is the second form of the boss. Basically, there's the golem form, which you're going to be fighting twice. Those are the easier part. And then there's this guy, which is like the humanoid form. This one is where it gets a little sketchy sometimes. All right, so he does the beam barrage where he basically charges up a beam. You can see it, right? And there you go, boom. He does the celestial projectiles. So basically he's shooting these little tiny projectiles, equivalent to kind of like the ball lightning in the memory ones. He does the wormhole slam. This is really, really, really deadly if you get hit by it. But the thing is, it's very easy to time. So what you do is you just sit still and you wait for the blink of your character, because essentially this void stuff is going to pull you right in front of him and then he's going to slam. You just wait. You have to be patient. You have to time it very, very well. And then as soon as he TPs, you just dash away or flame dash or anything like that. You're not slowed. There's nothing actually stopping you. So you should be able to easily just blink away and not get hit by the slam. If you do get hit by it, however, you're probably going to die. Unless your build is very, very tanky. All right, next he does the cross mortar. So this is basically where there's 4 mortars just kind of spinning around him. These do a lot of damage, so you definitely don't want to be sitting in those. And they're a little bit unpredictable, right? Sometimes they'll be a little bit wide, sometimes they'll be really close to him, sometimes they'll be going like kind of a little bit in a diagonal angle a little bit. They don't particularly aim at you, but as you can see, yeah, they are random, so you have to be careful with those. Then he does the charge slam. So this is where you'll see this massive circle on the ground, and he's basically charging up this huge slam. And yeah, if you're in that circle, you're probably gonna die, so you don't want to be in there. Then he does the concentrated beam blast. So this is where he concentrates all these beams. You can see it, right? And he's basically charging up once again. And this, as it grows, and then it blows up. So again, you just want to move away out of that. He does the projectile barrage. So this is like, I guess you could say, almost the equivalent of an auto attack, right? It's you can see the projectiles are very small. They don't do too much damage there. Then he does the laser storm slam. So this is very interesting. I really like this attack. I feel like bosses should have more of these. Essentially, he charged up this thing that spins, right? And you can see it spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And it's gonna get smaller and smaller and smaller. And when it gets to the very end, he's gonna charge up this huge slam once again, and then slam the ground with it. You can see it basically the charging up right about there, right? You'll see the outline of the circle of where you want to be out. But when it comes to the thing itself, you basically just have to go closer and closer to the boss, or at the very beginning, basically jump out of the circle. He's going to keep channeling it no matter what. All right, and then you have the Syntheeth Nightmare, which is the final one of the phases. He's got this thing right there, which is really annoying. It's basically where the boss will blink in a bunch of different directions and fire projectiles at the player, right? So he's just gonna blink in a bunch of different directions, shoot the projectiles as he's blinking, and these hurt like a ton. They hurt like these will kill you. If I die to this boss, typically it's from this. It's really annoying. There's a lot of projectiles moving around, and you have to be just very careful. And then you also have the black hole projectiles as well. So these are you can see them right there, right? They're little black holes, and then they start going in every direction. This is also quite deadly, but these are a lot slower moving, so they're easy to see compared to these guys here. These little projectiles, they move very quickly. Okay, so in terms of tips and tricks, there's obviously going to be, I'll link the guide in the description for this specific guide. There's going to be things that you can do in terms of your pantheons and whatnot, but nothing too crazy there. In terms of the sort of damage that you're taking, lightning damage seems to be a lot of it, if not almost all of it. So bringing a topaz flask is not necessarily a bad idea. You'll definitely want to be shock immune if you intend to get hit, because if you are shocked, you can take upwards of 50% more damage, which is a pretty big deal. Fortify is great because it's 20% damage from all damage types, so even elemental and whatnot. And then of course a basalt flask is quite good for the 15% physical damage taken reduced, of course. And then quartz flask if you're a dodge build, to try to cap out your dodge and spell dodge, right? For quartz, those are typically what you're going to be going for. So that's pretty much all there is to say about it. Now that's a lot. There's a ton when it comes to this boss. So let's go ahead and jump right into it on our 5-link setup, the same build that I've been using for the entirety of this series. We're gonna swap in the freezing pulse for the actual portion of the game where we are clearing the map, and then at the very end we are going to swap into Ice Spear. So like I said, we never know what we're going to be dealing with until we're actually in the map itself. One thing to note, it cannot be reflect. So you're never going to walk into one of these maps and kill yourself. That's never going to happen. But for example, this map, we have monsters of 40% chance to avoid ailments, which is kind of annoying. Monsters of onslaught, which is also kind of annoying. That means attack and gas speed. And bloodline mod, frenzy charge on hit, and frenzy charge on hit. Jesus. So we're going to have to deal with a bit of a turbo boss if you get hit here. And then for the synthesized modifiers, we got an additional breach splinter, 500% rarity, and pack size to be upgraded to rare. So nothing too crazy here. We didn't get any of the juicy juice, but let's go ahead and clear this map up, and then we're going to swap into, like I said, Ice Spear for the actual boss itself. So it would appear as though I got absolutely demolished by these projectiles there. Gonna have to be a little careful. Oh, okay, I'm missing my quick silver flask. I was wondering why I was so slow. Alright, so I'm not gonna clear the whole map, but you know, you can clear it. Personally, I don't like to clear these maps unless I get really good rewards. But for example, breach splinters, like what's the odds of me getting anything worthwhile, right? A splinter of ash, like I'm not gonna clear the entire map. I don't care for the XP either. So there's no reason for me to go out of my way to clear this whole thing. That being said, let's say I had, I don't know, like influenced items or something like that. Because it's monster level 83, that means that you're getting 84 to 85 bases. So, right, that could mean I could get a really good base with the right item level with the right influence. So then I would actually be much more interested in full clearing the actual encounter. But for something like, you know, breach splinters, that's like, nah, I don't really care. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this up. Let's get ourselves to the boss. As you can see, though, the clear is still pretty good on a 5-link. We're not really struggling with any sort of damage issues or anything like that. All right, so this is where the boss fights. We're going to swap into Ice Spear. Might as well put back on our actual damage flask. So Venarius is going to talk, whatever, and then comes the first boss. So I'm going to obviously debuff him. Alright, put my Flame Golem, put my little Arcanist Brand. This is that one right there is a slam, right? Charge slam, charge slam, charge slam. So they're actually pretty fast. Now remember that I said this is going to be a turbo, right? Because there is frenzy charges and there's also onslaught. So this is a fast boss. Typically he's not going to slam anywhere near as fast. But of course, because this is a turbo boss, it's going to be a little bit more annoying to deal with. I'm actually not going to be able to just walk out. So here's the leap slam. So that's the there we go with the where he blows them all up. So this is going to be a spin, I think, right? Yep. Okay. Yep. There's the spin. There's a little combo, little leap slam. Little combo explosion. Leap slam again, and there you go. So like I said, these bosses are quite squishy, right? They're really not that hard to deal with, but they do a lot of damage. So let's see the second boss here. I'm pretty much just gonna one-shot his ass. Like if I actually try to, I'll just one-shot him. But here we go with the slam. That's what I was talking about, right? So you basically wanna wait a little bit, right? Wait a little bit, just be real patient, and as soon as you actually get sucked in from the black stuff, just dash out and you're not going to take any damage. But as you saw, these bosses are really squishy. This is a 5-link, right? Like, this is not a crazy expensive build. This is a very, very league starty scenario, league start build. It can deal with this map extremely easily. And the thing is, remember, these are actually not that expensive initially in a league start, because a lot of people can't afford that to run these maps. They can't afford to gamble, to take that gamble. So if you're one of these people that's able to clear these maps very, very early in a league, right, you can make a ton of profit from it. So here comes the third phase, which is going to once again be a golem. So basically the exact same, right, as the first guy. So I'm just going to go ahead and murder it. There's no reason for me to just to not do that, because you've seen the combos and all that, the mechanics. All right, here comes the last phase. All right, so here we go with the projectiles. That's a massive slam. Definitely want to take out of that. The mortar, the little void stuff on the ground. Pull of the void. This is where I would dash out. But as you can see, very, very squishy bosses. I would say that these bosses are actually way squishier than the memory bosses, probably because there's 4 of them. So they decided to make them squishy. But the result is that Cortex, in a way, is actually easier than the memory fragments, at least for this build. I would say it's actually easier because you just one-shot the bosses anyways, all 4 of them, even with very, very little damage. So long as you have the proper setup of your debuffs with the Arcanist Brand, the Flame Golem, and whatnot, there you go. So I got the gloves. Pretty unlucky here. These are, I think, the most common, like I said earlier, but definitely the worst. So that would be a pure loss for me, but that's okay, because let's just say, hypothetically, if we look at the loot, right, and let's say Bottled Faith is 10x, let's just say Cortex is 2x, and let's just say that, I don't know, Bottled Faith is about a 25% drop, 1 in 4, 1 in 5. Let's just say 1 in 4. That means that every 4 maps, right, which would be 8x, I'm getting a Bottled Faith, which is 10x, and then I'm also going to get maybe a garb, and then 3 pairs of gloves, or like a nebulous or something. But overall, I'm pretty much going to make profit every single time. One thing to note about that is that you can actually head over to the website PoEProfit.com, website, an application made by content creator Grimro. And if you go under bosses, well, I guess not right now, but you should be able to go under bosses, and then you should be able to look for Cortex, and he does have the math on the different outcomes and your basically profit that you should make, right? Your estimated profit whenever you are killing these different bosses, so you can actually visually see, like, do I think this is going to be profitable or not? And then of course you have to remember that this is part of the feared encounter, so if you're able to do the feared, you're getting double the value from your Cortex, right? So you can afford to technically run Cortex at a loss of currency, because if you're able to do the feared afterwards, technically you're getting the value of 2 Cortexes from a single Cortex. map. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Cortex. Definitely a bit of a longer episode here, but there's a lot to cover. Now, before I go, as always, I want to say a massive thank you to my supporters. So Jordan, Fruit Fly, Thomas, Naroth, Master, Tim, Nate, Jacob, Flame Scorpion, Reese, Emil, Road to Millions, Alex, Brandon, Don, Joseph, welcome back, Panda, Atticus, Scott, Bart, Grimoire, Johnny, Ronald, Kevin, Mercury, and Bidson, as well as a massive thank you to anybody else who has supported me in the past or anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous. I will catch you guys in the next guide. Peace.